The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to this NGPF podcast, a webinar on trends in personal finance. My name is Tim Ranzetta and I am going to be joined by Abby Alcala. We are excited to be able to share with you our thoughts on what you need to know that's new in personal finance. I think, as I mentioned to folks in an email you probably got a day ago, is we are going to choose a different format today. And I guess this came from some feedback we got from educators, which I thought was particularly well placed, which was they said your year-end review on trends, you cover a ton of topics, and then you give us this long laundry list of resources that we can use to bring it back to the classroom, and our time is precious, and so we prefer to leave the webinar having had time to dive into the resources. So this is going to be less about me talking about 10 trends and more about you selecting what trends you want to learn about, and then actually have you look at 3 resources that we think are well positioned to bring that trend to life for your students, and then actually take the additional step of figuring out how you would implement it. And so the process will be, I will be putting a polling question out there shortly where you'll select what 3 of the 5 trends you want us to cover. I will explain the trend, you'll review 3 resources, and then you'll develop 1 key implementation idea. And we're going to ask you to get involved through the chat. So the chat on your screen, I believe, if any of you have difficulty finding it, I believe, Abby, can you help me here? Is this on the right-hand side of their screens in terms of where they can find the chat, which we're going to ask them to contribute?
Yep, exactly. So, folks, you're going to, on the right side in your command panel, click the little arrow down for the chat, and we will be posting some links there as well as in your question box. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in, and Tim and I will answer those.
Very good. Thanks, Abby. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll. So again, want to get your input on what 3 trends you want us to cover during the session. So the 5 choices you have, why is the stock market so volatile these days? And I've positioned them all as questions because I know you're all very curious. How will AI, artificial intelligence, impact the jobs of the future? Number 3, how can I educate my students about online shopping? Number 4, what are the most popular finance apps? And then lastly, how can I protect my information given all of these data hacks? So select 3. I should have made that clearer. Select 3 of the 5, and we are going to give you a little bit of time to answer those, and then we're going to choose the top 3. The good news for those of you who select one that is not ultimately used, the good news is they will all be available in a slide deck afterwards. So you will have the ability to check out what some of the data behind the trend is, as well as the resources. We've got 90% who voted. It looks like there are, good news, there's actually 3 pretty clear winners. So I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, this is incredible. We got 98% who voted, and I'm going to close the poll and share with you the results. So the top 3, Abby, we will be covering today, and I better write these down, is what are the most popular finance apps? How can I protect my information given all these data hacks? And why is the stock market so volatile these days? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hide these results. Abby, did you write those down?
I have them all.
All right, so why don't I start with, because I think the order of the slides, I'm going to start with the stock market question. So the first, I'm going to send another polling question out here because we want to test your knowledge here. So the first question related to the stock market is, what do you think explains the recent volatility, the ups and downs that we've seen in the stock market? Select one of the following: tariffs, job market, Federal Reserve, or company earnings. Which of these factors explains the recent volatility in the stock market? Tariffs, job market, Federal Reserve, or company earnings? Okay, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds here. 4, 3, 2. I'm kind of your built-in Kahoot here. 3, 2, 1. We're going to close the poll. Here are the results. So overwhelming majority said tariffs, number 1, Federal Reserve, number 2, company earnings, and nobody said job market. So let's take a look at the slides to see which of those answers is right. Well, it was kind of a trick question. Depending on which day of the week you're reading the Wall Street Journal, it could be any of those reasons. So the tariffs with the Chinese, obviously, there's a trade war going on. And the concern, I think, from a global perspective is just what impact is this going to have on global growth? In terms of why the job market is important, so you're all aware on the first Friday of every month, the economic statistics come out about the number of new jobs created as well as the unemployment rate. And so oftentimes you'll see the market react to that. And the principal reason being, if the job market is healthy, well, consumers' confidence tends to be high when jobs are plentiful and unemployment is as low as it is today, which I believe is 3.7, because consumer spending makes up 70% of the economy. And so that's a real huge driver for economic growth, is how healthy the job market is. With the Federal Reserve, so kind of the health of the job market really plays a critical role in terms of how the Federal Reserve thinks about interest rates. And raising interest rates, obviously the Federal Reserve at this point in time is going from a zero interest rate, basically zero interest rates for a great period of time following the Great Recession, and now they're in a tightening phase. And the concern is that as they continue to raise rates, well, that raises the cost of money, and the cost of money means mortgages are more expensive and loans, and now actually as interest rates go up and savings interest rates on savings go up too, then suddenly investors have alternatives to investing in the stock market. They can also get 2 to 3% on their savings. And so that's another thing that makes people nervous, is that when the Fed is raising rates, well, perhaps they're going to start to dampen growth. And then the last thing is company earnings, which is really a long-term driver of stock prices, because ultimately that's what the value of a company in the short term can be driven by a lot of different reasons, but in the long term it tends to be driven by earnings. So I thought this was interesting, kind of looking at how the stock market's done over the past year. So this is a great website I think many of you are familiar with, called FinViz. This is one of my favorites because it teaches kids about what you're seeing here is the S&P 500. And so they can see it in a real graphical way and get a better understanding of what the bigger companies are, which is the size of the box, is the market capitalization of the companies. So these are the return of the individual companies over the past year. And so you see kind of great differences even with companies in the same industry. So Facebook down 22%, Microsoft up 27%, both in the technology space. So anyway, what this is meant to show is that over the course of the past year, some companies have done extremely well, others have done poorly. I think overall, when we look at the S&P 500 year to date, if you kind of trace where we were on January 1st, we were 2,674 was the S&P 500. I don't know where we closed today, but I'm guessing we're pretty close to where we started the year. However, we've had quite a few in the way of ups and downs. What's interesting to me is that when you actually look, this has been a phenomenal year for corporate earnings, one of the best in a very long time, probably the best since we came out of the recession. You know, company earnings are up 18% in the last 12 months. That's largely been driven by the tax cut. Once companies get their income tax rates cut, or they get their corporate tax rates cut, that drops right to the bottom line. And so even in an environment where company earnings have grown dramatically, 18%, and when we get the fourth quarter, it'll be over 20% for the calendar year. Those are really strong earnings. 20%. And so what you learn is that, well, the market really, that's looking in the rear view mirror, and the market is always looking 6 to 12 months ahead. And so if you start to read what Wall Street analysts are saying, 2019 is going to be a much lower year because you've cycled through the impact of that big corporate tax cut.
Tim,
Okay.
before we move on, we have a teacher who's asking for you to explain a little bit more about market capitalization, if you can go into more detail.
Sure. So market capitalization, I guess the simplest way to describe it, it's typically when people talk about the size of a company, you can look at revenues, which is their, the sales that they generate, the top line. You can look at their earnings, which is kind of what their net profit is. So income minus expenses. And then market capitalization just refers to, basically, you take the number of shares that a company has outstanding. So this is their currency. This is how many shares that company has issued, and you multiply by their stock price. And that kind of just gives you a market capitalization. So again, I think, especially with young people, they'll often get confused because they'll see a stock that has a price of, say, $300 or $400 a share, and another that has a stock price of $40 a share, and they'll immediately assume, well, the company that has a $300 per share price must be more valuable than the $40 per share. But that's not exactly true. Yes, the stock prices may be higher, but the value of the company, you have to take into account how many shares have they issued. And so many of these larger companies have issued billions of shares, or at least hundreds of millions. And so all we're doing here is trying to get all these companies on an equal playing field, saying how much value is there in the company, and that's just by taking the number of shares that they've issued, the number of shares issued and outstanding, and multiply that by the share price that you don't read in the papers anymore, that you see online. Make sense? All right. So I want to jump into kind of our next phase. This is where you get to do a little bit of work. So I've taken 3 of our investing resources here, and there's 2 ways that you're going to be able to go in and research these. One is, those of you familiar with Bitly, I've produced the 3 Bitly links here. The other way is that Abby's going to go ahead and send those out on the chat function. She'll send the link so you can just click on them. So what I want you to do for the next 5 to 7 minutes is go into each of these 3 activities. And you're going to have to move pretty quickly because we're only giving you 5 to 7 minutes. But go into them and assess whether you think they're going to be activities that you can use with your students. And so, and then we're going to have a conversation about that. So again, I'm going to give you 5 to 7 minutes, the 3 activities. And 2 of the 3 are actually real new ones that we've had. How estimating pennies in a jar is like the stock market. Second is our game called Stacks. And the third is Let's Make a Mutual Fund, which was produced, I believe she's even on the webinar herself, Andrea Stemper, an NGPF fellow. She's the one who created this great activity to help really give students a better understanding of how mutual and index funds work. So if you're familiar with, some of you may be familiar with 1 or 2 of these, I would encourage you to spend your time on the third. But we're going to start the clock, right, Abby? And we're going to give folks time to go look at these 3 resources. As you find the one you want to use, if you can just go into the chat area and indicate which one you're choosing and the reason why you think it would work well with your students. Ready, go.
Excellent. You all have about 5 to 7 minutes. I'm going to put on some beautiful, relaxing jazz music while you're all working. So go ahead and go off and enjoy. All right, folks, you have about 1 more minute left. 1 more minute. right, folks. So we're just kind of wrapping up that last portion where you have explored 3 activities that Tim has mentioned. It's projected onto the screen right now. What I'm going to have you do now is just take, we're going to be really intentional about this time, is I'm going to give you 2 minutes to actually respond into this chat box. You'll be sending it to myself and to Tim. I want you to choose, so you're going to tell me 2 things. The first is, which of these 3 activities did you find really interesting and you could definitely see using in your class? So that's the first thing I want you to tell me. The second part is, how would you implement this into your classroom? What do you kind of expect to do when planning it, delivering it, and using some kind of assessment or grading it? So in the chat box here, I'm looking for 2 things. The first is telling me which of these 3 activities did you really focus on during this time of exploration? And the second is, how would you implement this in your classroom if you haven't already? So I'll give you 2 minutes. If you still have extra time, you can go ahead and continue to still look at the other activities, but I'm going to give you intentional 2 minutes to give a really thoughtful response, and I'm going to call on a couple people to share their answers. Go ahead, 2 minutes. All right, folks. Thank you so much. We're kind of going through, and there's a lot of really awesome responses. So thank you so much. Just to clarify, the chat box on your side panel is actually perfect for both questions and also the chat to submit your answers for the task that Tim and I are asking you to do. So it's all one box. It all goes to the same thing to myself and to Tim. So you're in the right spot. As I'm looking through the responses, there's a lot of people saying that they love stacks. Lots of people saying they love the penny activity. I'm actually going to call on Maggie Robles to share a little bit about how or what she thought about this activity and how she implemented this in. So, Maggie, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you don't mind sharing with the group. 1 second. All right, Maggie. You there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think I had this ability.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
So the question is, you wanted to know how I would use it?
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about like why you chose this one as the standout one, and how you are planning or have used stacks in your classroom.
Well, I would say anything that I can use where the students have an individual way of responding very quickly and then also have a chance to collaborate with others, I think is a great activity. And so this is something simple that they all can latch onto. It does not matter like what degree of math ability they have. They can look at a jar and make a guess. So it's what we call in math like a low floor, a scalability. Everyone has a chance to respond. And then something as simple as that, then they can kind of see from everyone else's point of view what they put and then decide if this is something that, oh, maybe their guess was too low, maybe it was too high. But then just to get them experiencing why people make different decisions throughout their lives because of what other people have said to them, whether it be parents, family, or their financial advisors, or just people in the crowd that they run with.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, right. Earlier I said stacks. I meant to say pennies in a jar. You're absolutely right. Thank you so much for sharing, Maggie. Awesome.
Sorry. Yeah, I was talking about the pennies in a jar.
Yeah, that was me. I had seen the word stacks and I was like, oh yeah. But yes, awesome. The pennies in a jar. We've just released that onto our website just recently. So I'm really glad that we're getting some teachers who are liking that. So thank you so much.
I also like stacks. If you wanted to call in someone else, you're more than welcome.
Sure. All right. I'm looking at some more answers, and let's go ahead and see. Jennifer Clark, do you mind sharing a little bit about stacks? And I'm going to unmute you in just 1 second. And then Maggie, I'm going to mute you back just so you don't have to worry about that. Cool. Jennifer, you there? Okay. Jennifer, if you do get the chance to connect with us, you can go and just start talking because I've unmuted you. So if you're there, we can hear you. Oh, just kidding. Okay, Jennifer's mic is not working. But thanks, Jennifer. So a little bit about, I'll read it out to you guys. I'll share her response a little bit. She says she's used stacks as a final activity after she's completed the investing unit. And they had enough base knowledge, her students had enough base knowledge by that time so they can make really informed decisions about applying the strategies that they've learned. She said she also likes the mutual fund idea because it gets kids up and moving, interacting, communicating. And there's a lot of people who also shared this. Looks like Donna, Holly, you guys liked the mutual fund idea or activity with Shayla. And Jennifer was also saying diversification is such an important principle of investing that she really enjoys using this with her students. So thanks so much, Jennifer. Sorry your mic doesn't work, but that's all right. Let's see. For the Let's Make a Mutual Fund activity, we have here, Holly's also a good fan who has explained a little bit in her answers. Holly, I'm going to try unmuting you if your mic works. Holly, I have now unmuted you. Are you there?
Hi. All right, I'm just walking away from the baby for a second. I'm multitasking. So I think this activity seems really great because it seems like it would create some movement in the room, and I think any visuals like that are always really helpful.
Mm-hmm. And have you used it in your class before?
I have not used it in my class, but I'm looking to do some stock market activities, and I think this would be kind of a great additional activity to tack on to that after.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, this is good to learn about.
Cool. And then also, as we're moving into these next activities, Holly, sorry, thank you so much for sharing, Holly. I'm gonna mute you because you're
Okay.
around a little bit.
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. I have some really great answers for your guys' feedback for these 3 activities. We're going to transition to the next topic. So Tim, go ahead and take it away.
Abby, what would you like to do next?
Let's see. I think we should do the data hacks one.
All right, so here we go. Polling question for the group. What was the biggest data hack in 2018? Equifax, Marriott Starwood, MyFitnessPal, or Cambridge Analytica? That's a typo. It should be Cambridge Analytica. And the results are coming in fast and furious. Okay. 10 seconds. We got 80% in so far. And the other 20% are Googling to look for the answer. Come on, guys. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the results. All right, again, kind of a trick question. Equifax happened in 2017, but even if I said what were the biggest data hacks in the last 2 years, the answer would still be the one in terms of sheer quantity of people. Over 500 million records were hacked at Marriott Starwood. So let me take you through some quick slides. You know, this is, I think I saw the headline, and it's kind of, we've become almost immune to this idea. Another week, another data breach. I didn't even realize MyFitnessPal, which I used to use. Unfortunately, I wish I was still using. But just look at the raw numbers here, 500 million. And Marriott Starwood, for those of you who aren't familiar, incredibly large hotel chain. Some of the information that apparently was captured was passport numbers. So, and obviously Equifax last year was an incredible hack because they basically pulled information straight from your credit report. So I can't imagine more sensitive information that's currently out there on the dark web. So how are young adults, and this is one of our data crunches. Those of you not familiar with our data crunches, that's a graph or chart followed by 5 questions. We're getting kids to interpret data and with a personal finance spin. So this is the way young adults, well, it's actually a variety of age groups. The way to read this chart is basically here are 5 different ways that folks use to protect their identities online. And then as we move, there's 4 bars for each category. So for example, clearing cookies and browser history is the most frequently used strategy to be less visible online. And you'll see the pattern here where 18 to 29-year-olds, which is the darkest blue, those bars are the highest for each of these categories. This actually dates back to 2014 too. So I'm guessing the height of these bars would all be a lot higher because we've become a lot more sensitive to our information. So I will just leave you with a couple of hints, and these probably are as important for us as they are for our students. You know, practice good password hygiene. So anytime there is a hack, passwords are typically part of that hack. And so if you're using the same password across a lot of different websites, well, you're not practicing good password hygiene, as well as not choosing the most common passwords. I believe, I can't remember whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. But choose a password or I use one of those third-party password companies that comes up with passwords for me called LastPass. Another thing, obviously, is regularly check your credit reports. You get to look at them free annually, and so there's 3 different credit bureaus. So if you spread them out 4 months at a time, you get to look throughout the course of the year to make sure there's nothing going on your credit reports. Better yet, set up a credit freeze. And so what that does, and you can do that with each of the 3 agencies, and I believe the 3 credit bureaus, I believe that's free now. What that does is basically not allow anybody to open an account in your name. And then lastly, and you're seeing more and more companies offer this 2-factor authentication. And so very simply what that means is it's an extra layer of protection that you get. So in addition to putting in a username and password, the website that offers 2-factor will also be sending you a text, and that's the second factor that then allows you to access the website. So even if somebody has your password, as long as they haven't hacked your phone or hacked your texting software, that basically protects your account. And you're seeing more and more financial institutions. If you don't have 2-factor today, be sure to go to your bank's, any website that's dealing with your financial life, go to them and ask them about 2-factor, because more and more so I think we're seeing that happen. And then if you want to look a little bit deeper into this topic, there's great PBS NewsHour, I believe it's an 8-minute section about the Marriott hack specifically, but then there's also some really good advice and might be something to capture your students' attention. So okay, so now we're going to go back to giving you an opportunity to look at 3 of our identity theft resources. And so the 3 here, and again, take 5, why don't we just say 5 minutes, and go through each of these and identify the one that you would choose. So if you've already used one in your classroom, then go look at the other 2. But I want kind of everybody to weigh in on one of the 3 that they've chosen and why. And again, it's Have You Been Hacked, which is an interactive, Hackers Plan Global Bank Heist, that's a FinCap Friday, and then Identity Theft, which is a full lesson. So those of you who maybe are less familiar with NGPF, by going into a full lesson, you'll kind of see how our playlists are structured. So you might find that useful. So I'm going to stop talking. We're going to give you 5 minutes, and if you can just fill the chat area with the resource that you haven't used, and hopefully you haven't used all 3. I'm guessing you haven't, because many of these that we have listed here are relatively new, but let us know what you chose and why.
For those who are asking about the links, I've just put it in the group chat box. So there's the hacked one, the bank heist one, and the ID theft lesson bit.lys in the group chat.
All right, 1 minute. Looks like folks are taking a little more time, so I will give you a couple more minutes. So again, if you can just put in your responses to which of the 3 resources you would most likely use in your class, if you can just put that in, and then we'll have a quick conversation. All right. Wow, a lot of great responses here. I am going to call on Sarah Lloyd. So I am going to unmute you if you have, if you're close to a microphone. I'd love to hear, because you kind of touched on the fact you had just done the identity theft lesson from the semester course. I'd love for other teachers to hear how that experience went, how your students responded. Sarah, are you there?
I'm here. Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect.
So yeah, we just did the identity theft lesson, and we were particularly enlightened by the password suggestions in strengthening passwords. Although I was finding one of my students had a similar method that he used, although I think his was very difficult to remember, but I guess he can remember it.
What was that?
One of my students was giving us his method for strong passwords.
Oh,
which-
okay.
Yeah, it was just different. I don't know. What else do you want to know?
Yeah, you mentioned you looked at the hacked. You also looked at the hacked interactive and kind of what you thought about that.
Yeah, so I just now clicked on that to try it. I hadn't seen that before. And it was a little overwhelming for me because there apparently have been so many different companies that were hacked. So to go through that list was a long list. And then when it was asking if you had used a credit card to make purchases at those various companies, there again, those were particular time frames. And so it was really hard for me to remember, sure, I've been there and I probably paid with a credit card, but was it during that time period? So it just seems like it's overwhelming to try to figure out, am I at risk?
Yeah, it is. It's almost like you need a full-time job to figure out if you have been hacked. So I always think the good assumption is that we better be checking our credit. We better be doing all those things on a pretty consistent basis because there's a lot of information about us out there. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to ask Jason to talk a little bit about FinCap Fridays and kind of why he thought that would be a good resource. Jason, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Why do you like FinCap Fridays?
Well, I like them because they some of these topics that are in our curriculums, we don't necessarily have 30 to 45 minutes to build a lesson and create a worksheet and all those things that may be valuable, just don't have the time to do them all. And so I kind of like the idea of the FinCap Fridays, a quick format to kind of introduce a topic, generate some discussion, and kind of get in and get out, if you will.
Got it. So you are using kind of do you go all the way through to the discussion prompt? So you're kind of can you just familiarize folks who may not have gotten through a FinCap Friday what the various parts of it are?
Yeah, I mean, usually it starts with a Kahoot, and so it generates a little bit of discussion, and then there is usually kind of like a video clip that you can watch that'll kind of bring them up to speed on whatever that current event might be. And then you usually provide like a discussion question at the end and then some references. I tend to use the references more. I don't necessarily pass them on to the students, but just to educate myself before I engage them in a conversation.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for your feedback on that. We're going to move on to topic number 3. Here
All
we
right.
go.
So this is the popular finance apps.
All right, let me go to that section. So I will quickly go through some of we got to do uh-oh, I hope nobody saw that. We got to do a polling question here. And I apologize to folks. I understand I was blocking kind of the slides that I was talking about. And so I will try and do better this time. Here we go. We're going to look at what's the top finance app in the App Store. You got 4 choices: Credit Karma, Venmo, Bank of America Mobile Banking, or Cash App. All right, here we go. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, most people think Venmo, Bank of America Mobile Banking third, Cash App, and Credit Karma. Let's look at the results. So this is from a website called App Annie, and she gives the ratings from basically the iTunes store. And so the #1 top finance app today is Cash App. Those of you not familiar with Cash App, I wasn't either until one of my interns mentioned to me that they had this great $5 referral program. It's basically Square's business to consumer, it's a consumer payment, peer-to-peer similar to Venmo. And so they appear to be trending higher than Venmo. What I did was I gave you the top 10 or 11 here. And what I did was I grouped them into, what are the apps that your students are most likely using? Person to person would probably be number one. Credit score, so Credit Karma, which enables folks to get a credit score for free. That used to be a big deal, and now we're seeing more and more banks offer that. But that's become a very successful business because they've become a lead generation source for credit card companies in a nutshell. Mobile banking is third, so you see Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo on the list. You see some budgeting apps, Clarity Money, which I'm less familiar with. And then lastly, this paycheck to paycheck service. This is new on my radar, and I think this is why it's always important to keep up to date on what are the apps that are most popular. It's at the bottom of the list there, you'll see EarnIn. And basically what it is it enables folks who maybe get hourly pay, enables them to get paid before their paycheck comes in. Similar to payday lending, but without the onerous fee structure. And so there's things like if I am an hourly employee, I have to send them my time card and they have to verify that I was actually at work. And then I can get basically paid for those hours I worked, not from my employer, but from EarnIn, and then I got to pay them back when my paycheck rolls in. And the fact that this is a top 10 or 11 app tells you that this is a pretty popular service for folks who are living paycheck to paycheck and getting the cash a little bit sooner than their pay period without going to a payday lender. Seems to be a pretty attractive business. So here are the 3 finance apps resources I'm going to have you take a look at. So the first is an activity we call Explore Person-to-Person Payments, and I think Abby's going to go ahead and send those, or you can use the bit.ly links. We'll send those over the chat. The first one's a person-to-person payments. The second is navigate your online bank account, and the third is online tools and apps. I'm going to ask you to do this because I want to be sensitive to your time here. If we can, in 5 minutes, or why don't I say 7, because these are pretty meaty activities here. Why don't you do the 2 things? We'll wrap them into both. One is the activity you choose, and then talk about where you would implement it. Where would you put it into your, where you would see it fitting into your curriculum, and then maybe even the extra step of, okay, now what are some of the execution or implementation issues I better keep in mind if I'm going to do this specific activity. So I'm going to stop talking, give you, why don't I say 6 minutes, put in the resource you think you'd like to use, as well as where it would fit in your curriculum and how you would think about implementing it. Ready, go.
All right, folks, I'll give you about 1 more minute, and then we're going to share our answers. All right, folks. I see some more answers pouring in, but I do want to be conscious of your time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like Susan, you have some good insight about looking at the online tools and apps, and a little bit, you've given a lot of really great detail about how you implement this in your classroom with like pairs and groups. So Susan, I'm going to unmute you as well and have you share a little bit about your plan for that. So 1 second. All right, Susan, can you hear us? Hi, Susan. Go ahead and start talking. See if we can hear you. While Susan, if you're still working on that mic. Oh, so I
You want
can.
to just read? You just want to read that, Abby?
Yeah, sure. So Susan said that she would put her groups in pairs or groups of 3, having each group member research a little bit of one or more of the apps that's shared in the Google Doc, and then have them come all together to talk about the results that they have finished. Kind of like a jigsaw kind of strategy. So that's awesome. And then they can together choose and complete one of the projects. So that way they can look at the experience, but wouldn't take as much time to complete. And she likes project ideas and that her students would enjoy them. So thanks, Susan. Awesome. And then Sue, if you could share a little bit about the online bank simulation. I'm going to try unmuting you. You have also a really great response, and we'll try to see if this works for you. Oh. I don't know if Susan's works either, but these are really great. Let me share a little bit about Sue.
Sue, are you there?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Awesome.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I've used the online bank simulation before, and I think it's pretty quick for them to do. It doesn't take a lot of time. Again, somebody else had mentioned how some ideas you don't want to spend a lot of time on it. This one's good. I also pair them up because some kids really get it and then others really struggle. So they sort of work together and share their answers and see maybe who's right or wrong as it goes. So I just think it's a good partner project for them to do, and I really believe that this is the way the kids are going to, be using banking. So I appreciate that they can do a simulation like this.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And there was a handful of you that also said that you guys liked the navigate your online bank account. Like Jen Parasu also said the same thing. Wayne, it looks like you're also, this is useful for you because your students have jobs and bank accounts, but don't use that online banking. So this is good practice. So awesome. Thank you so much. So as we're wrapping up, I am seeing that there's a lot of people who are really interested in other people's responses too, which is super great because we definitely want to kind of go back and forth with that collaborative piece so we can really tap into that group wisdom. And so Zach had a really good suggestion of actually sharing the responses from the whole group. So what I'm going to do in the follow-up email when you receive your webinar certificate, we'll create a spreadsheet of all the responses from the group because there's a lot of really great feedback here and people who could kind of partner up and maybe see like, how did you deliver this in your classroom? What tips did you find that was useful? Just so we can share that wisdom. So Tim and I will make sure we send that out to you so you guys can kind of collaborate and work on that together. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank folks for participating today. As you know, this was a new method for us to engage you in a different way, and I'd love for your feedback. So when this webinar ends, you'll have an opportunity to answer the survey. The third question is an open-ended one. We'd love your feedback. There's certainly some ideas I already have on how I could do a better job, but would appreciate what you thought too, how the experience was for you, because we saw as the end goal really making sure that you had new resources that you could bring to your students and really giving you that time to both review and analyze those resources and then be able to share and hear from other teachers about either how they've used them or how they plan to use them, as well as some of the I thought there were some great implementation issues or implementation ideas that were raised about how you could bring this to the classroom, jigsaw or pair students up, and just being able to share that information, I think is incredibly valuable and makes you more confident about how it will work in the classroom. So with anything else, Abby?
No, thank you all so much for joining, and thank yous for your patience. And as we're trying this kind of new format, it's really fun on our end. And so we hope that you had a good time as well.